Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Pearson Maths Festival. We're thrilled to have you join us. We believe that maths should be engaging and accessible to all. Our aim over the course of the festival is to come together and, as maths teaching community, share some amazing ideas and stories of how to engage and inspire our learners, especially in how we can amplify the teaching and learning experience and empower all those involved in maths education: teachers, learners, families, and communities. That's why our free conferences are focused on driving the conversation from reflecting on the recent changes in education and sharing best practice to what the future of maths education could look like. Together with you, fellow educators and industry experts, our conversation will drive how we can help schools, colleges, learners, and families make the most of maths education now and in the future. So to ensure as many people as possible can benefit from our discussion, we'll be recording this session and the others throughout the week. However, we hope that you can join as many of the sessions as possible live to benefit from and contribute to the live discussions and pose your questions. So during this session, all participants can send in questions via the questions and answer box. If we're not able to answer your question in the chat session, we'll follow up after the event. So please also use the chat function to talk to each other throughout the session. You can be part of the conversation on social media too, using the hashtag Pearson Maths Festival 21, and by entering our mini competitions, nominating your colleagues as maths champions, and by answering our polls that you'll see on @Pearson Schools. Please do get involved. So welcome to this session of Maths Leaders, the Impact of the Pandemic and the Future of Education. We've got a variety of leaders from around the country, and what I'd like to do is get them to introduce themselves. So first on my screen is Naomi. Naomi, do you want to kick off and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Mark. My name is Naomi Bartholomew Miller, and I am the head of STEM at a school in the northeast of England. I'm also a credible specialist for Pearson, working with networks of schools across the country, supporting the delivery of the qualifications, as well as working for the research school and as a One Vision consultant. And then my other role is as part of the Pupil executive strategy team and leading the math side of things. And I'm very grateful to have been invited tonight on to this session. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Alex Payne, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex. Now I'm an assistant principal for one of the GAT schools. In addition to overseeing everything to do with maths, as well as a few other subjects, I am a maths teacher. And I also lead the subject leaders across all of the GAT schools.
Thanks, Alex. Dana, would you mind going next?
No problem. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Brown, and I'm one of the maths advisors for United Learning. So it's a large multi-academy trust made up of academies and independent schools. And I'm delighted to be joined by two of our heads of departments on this festival event today. And Mark, you'll introduce them over to them shortly. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dana. Andrew, would you mind going next?
Not a problem. Hi, I'm Andrew Harrison. I'm head of maths faculty at William Humes Grammar School in Manchester. We're an inner city Manchester academy, part of the United Learning Trust. And we've been having fun recently. So yeah, it'd be nice to talk to everyone.
Okay. Finally, Kendall.
Hi, thanks, Mark. So my name is Kendall. I'm the head of maths here at Shoreham Academy. So we're a comprehensive secondary school, as well as we're also in the United Learning Trust. So as well, we are also having fun here at Shoreham. So can't wait to join.
And Kendall, would you like to tell everyone where your accent is from?
Yeah, so I'm actually originally from New Jersey. I've taught in the United Kingdom now England for 5 years, and I've taught in the US for 2.
So it just gives us an extra bit of a different perspective on things. So for everyone back in their offices, at homes, still in school, I don't actually think I can begin this session without mentioning something about the football last night. And the thing that actually really struck me was the penalties. You know, we have Bukayo Saka. He's a 19-year-old, so he's the same age as our year 13s who left last year. He missed a penalty for England. Our hearts absolutely go out to him as a 19-year-old. He is only a lad. But what strikes me is how impressed I am of someone of that age stepping up and taking a penalty for England. And, you know, how do we develop that kind of resilience in our pupils, you know, especially given there's an opportunity to fall down? And how do we get our pupils to step up to the plate, to aim high, and how do we prepare them for that kind of thing? You know, I've had students over the years that tell me, "Oh, I'm never going to get a grade 7," and they're hedging their bets. They're trying to protect their self-esteem. So, Naomi, have you got any comments on that one about, you know, has it become worse in this situation of the pandemic over the past year? Have we got some opportunities?
Yeah, I think so. And I think actually what we've got now is we've actually got this real opportunity to be quite explicit with the fact that these students have been resilient. They have gone through something that none of us have ever experienced in our school career. You know, we've all done exams and they haven't. You know, they're experiencing something and having to be resilient in a very different way. But I think, like this morning, I sent my kids off to school with lots of very tired children at school, but with a message from school saying, you know, we're celebrating the fact that England got to the final. And yes, they didn't win, but actually we're going to use that as an opportunity. So I think also just talking to the students as well about things like, you know, yes, that was a disappointment, but actually how do you move on from that disappointment, and using those real examples, you know, those real life examples that they've all sat through that football last night. They've all watched those penalties being taken and seen that crushing disappointment at not winning those, not scoring those penalties, but they still have to carry on. And I think using that as a learning point as much as anything.
Anyone else want to throw in any comments? I mean, has it got worse? You know, do we? Is it something we need to concentrate on, or are we in danger of painting ourselves into a corner and thinking that there's more of a problem than there is?
I feel like so many media sources, a lot of people are telling kids, you're behind, you need to catch up. So I feel like by us addressing it in the classroom as well, as a student, I feel like I would just feel like, well, how am I ever going to catch up if all of these people are telling me I'm so behind? So I feel like in terms of the classroom, I'm almost telling my team not to address it and just to get on with it, because the only way we're going to catch these kids up is not by talking about how far behind they are, but actually implementing good teaching and learning strategies and implementing things that we're trying throughout all of our United Learning schools, like smarter grids and all of these other resources that we're helping to catch kids up without them even knowing. So it's almost like what we're doing behind the scenes that matters more than just talking about it.
Yeah, I've got a similar thing. I try to make in our classrooms, I try to make them not use the word catch up. I don't like the word catch up. It's such a negative thing. And I give the kids we try to tell them what an advantage they've had, because during the lockdown, they bought into learning, they were there, they kept going through their schooling. And what an advantage they had against other students in the UK who might not have had this opportunity. So in trying to be positive and find a positive spin on it, the kids are going to be in a much better position. But if you go ahead and you're constantly saying catch up and you're behind and this, that, and the other, and what a bad place it is at the moment, the students aren't going to react in the right way.
Are there any things we need to put in place to try and be more mindful that there might be some students who may be less resilient than before?
I think it is very much about the language, though, isn't it? I think everyone said there's that language of, you know, when we're doing summer schools for year 10s with this catch-up funding, not telling them that it's, not using that word of gaps, not about catching up and gaps, and it all just being about this sort of negative connotations with everything, but it's about getting off to a flying start, improving on what's already there and all those sorts of things, so that they feel positive, so that they don't feel like we're not instilling a sense of panic in them all the time, that they've got to catch up with something.
I like the word opportunity. I like putting that as much as I can, because they do react to that.
I think there's a lot of people out in the country now who are just going to plagiarize that word, Andrew, because plagiarism, I mean, it's environmentally friendly, it's recycling, and plagiarism saves time on these kind of things.
That's the most, that is flattery. Plagiarism is the best form of flattery.
Is there anything people have got in place that they're planning for the autumn terms in terms of just working in terms of children's mental health and the resilience?
Mark, I was just going to say actually about the term catch up. I mean, this is something that's been around for a long time, the term catch up. Pre-pandemic, we always had a group of students in our school that needed to catch up. And I think there's a danger now that we blur those lines, and those students that came into school not secondary ready just get merged into the plethora of everyone who fell behind, when schools weren't open and operating in the way that we've always known them to. And I think, we need to make sure that those students still get the support that we've always put in place for the students that come into year 7, to make sure that they are, they do catch up. But actually for everybody else, I think that language is really important. And, when we're talking about classroom behaviour management, we're always thinking about our language to get students on side, rather than saying stop turning around. We're saying please face the front. And actually that really careful choice of language as we get students back into school full time is really important. And I think you can very quickly slip into that, come on, we've got to catch up, we haven't got any time to waste, because as teachers we feel under pressure that we've got to catch them up. And I think it's really important now that as teachers and leaders, we take a step back and think, how do I make sure that my worries and my concerns as a teacher and a leader isn't put onto those students in my classroom delivery? I know that somebody, my head of department might be saying, come on, you've got to get through this curriculum, but I can't let that message get through to the students in my delivery, because for them, they're just learning the next thing as they should be. So I think, definitely as practitioners, we need to think really carefully about the language and make sure that any pressures that we feel under, we don't put onto the students. So yeah, that's my sort of view on it.
You're from, very much a senior leadership position in terms of a multi-academy trust. Are those kind of positions thinking very carefully about the language they use with their teachers, so that doesn't inadvertently get passed on to the pupils?
Yeah, and I think we're talking about, rather than talking about catch-up, we're talking about pacing plans. So making sure that every classroom teacher has a pacing plan for their class. So how do they ensure coverage of the curriculum, but not just, skimming the top of a topic, but actually, being able to, plan enough time to go deep enough into the topic so that they can master it. And it's a really, really difficult balance to strike with coverage and depth when we know that time is of the essence. But I think we're definitely stepping away from catch-up plans and pacing plans being more of a focus, to ensure that every class is on its own unique pace plan to ensure they get the right diet in the time that we have left.
Does the media have a role to play in this, in terms of, students will pick up on the rhetoric that's out there? Should we be lobbying to change the rhetoric if we think it's harmful?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is the phrase that they kept using, that exams were cancelled. And that was a massive frustration, particularly teaching year 10, because year 10s are soaking that up, thinking year 11s have had their exams cancelled. Is it going to happen for us? Sort of explain they haven't been cancelled at all. They're just in a different form. And that will continue next year. It may return back to exactly as previously, or it may be in another form again. But that message from the media, that constant repetition that GCSEs A-levels have been cancelled this year, it was incredibly frustrating. I think for the year 11s and 12s and 13s as much as anything, but also for the students coming through who are now sort of snapping at their heels, thinking, are we going to have our exams cancelled because that's what happened this year?
Yep. Alex, did you want to throw something on that one?
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe, depending on which year groups we're talking about, but we all generally have a kind of a spiral in our curriculums anyway. And so there's always going to be another opportunity actually to come back round to something that they may have missed, and to be able to just take it a little bit further back as your starting point, rather than worrying about trying to cram in extra work that they've missed out. And let's just come back round to it. And when we get to that point, make sure that we've filled that part in again. And then the other thing I was thinking was, actually, if we just change the language that we're using and start to be much more positive, as some others have said, and actually let's start to build some success and motivation for these students. That I think that if we can get them motivated, that they want to learn, I don't think it matters what they've missed or not missed. It's about getting them to want to learn, and all of that knowledge just kind of all comes in and just builds upon itself. And we have all those links that we have within maths. And I think there's always another opportunity to bring those links in to another area that they might not have had so much exposure from at that point, because they might have missed it. And I think we just need to be open to seeing those opportunities of kind of catching things up, if you like, but in a less formal way, so that we can go, we're doing a topic now, but it's got those other links. Let's backfill at that same time.
There was a key word that you mentioned there, success, but I'm going to come back to that in a second because I'm aware Andrew's got a point he wants to throw in.
Yeah, I just, one of the things, I'm going to look at the advantages. I'm sorry, I tried to be a positive person. But I think one thing we've learned and one thing we've got is now that when students say that year 11 last year didn't do their exams, which is what the press is telling them, then the answer is yes, they didn't. But that means that you're going to be continually assessed during the year. So you need to make sure you're up to date at all times. Because when the students look at it, we all know that a lot of students leave it till the last minute to do their work. And if we can encourage them and start to get more of an atmosphere of people doing it throughout the year, it will only benefit everyone. And I feel that that's what we've got to use this press that's out there to actually do in the schools, create that slightly different atmosphere where students are working throughout the year and not just at the end of the year.
Yep. Anyone got any other points they would like thrown on that one in terms of getting students to motivate them to work across the year? It's to me, it's you know, I had students last year that didn't really have much evidence when we came to doing the central assessed grades because they were the classic student that only threw their effort in the last minute. I'm just going to come back to a point that Alex made. It's that key word for me, success. How do we help students to believe that they can be successful? Is there anything else that we've learned over this past year that's really worked? Kendall, have you got anything you want to throw in on that one?
Something we're trying to do at Shoreham is trying to find more opportunities for students to feel successful. So, for example, our starter grids that we've implemented this year across United Learning have been really helpful because what we do is we pick 6 different skills in each box, and then the teachers can adapt that to whatever skills come up in terms of homework assessments or KPI tests, and we gradually increase the difficulty throughout the week. So that way students at the beginning of the week, we talk about how many boxes did you get? And I have a set for year 10 class, for example, and they might get maybe 2 or 3 correct. But by that Friday lesson, we're talking a couple days later, they're getting 4 boxes correct, 5 boxes correct. So it's almost finding really quick little wins to build their confidence. Like Andrew said, it's all about keeping the kids positive. So if they continue to see, you know, a failed KPI test after a failed KPI test after a failed KPI test, they're not going to want to keep taking them. They're not going to want to keep revising and putting time in. So it's trying to find those quick wins, those little wins. So starter grids are a really great one for that.
I mean, I totally agree in terms of, you know, those quick wins and those feelings of success. But, you know, is there a way that we can help students deal with failure that will help keep them more positive as well? Dana, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, and I think I'll just sort of refer back to what Kendall's just mentioned about the starter grids, because this is something that we've implemented across all of our schools.
Yeah.
And I think actually it's okay for the students to get 1 out of 6 on a Monday, because they know that over the course of the week, they're going to have support from their teacher, from their peers, so that by the end of it, they do feel success. So we expect them, if they can do all 6 on Monday, then actually, you know, if it's planned really carefully, they should be in the struggle zone on Monday, because if they can already do it, and we knew they could already do it, actually that wasn't the right task for those students. So
do you think it took much to help them manage their expectations on that one? Did it take much effort? You will struggle on a Monday and it will get easier through the week. Did that take, you know, are we teaching them what this process should be, or did it come naturally?
Definitely. And I think particularly our set 1 students, and, you know, we've got different schools of all sorts of different contexts, but our set 1 students, typically they think, oh, you know, in their head, they're getting the same starter grid as the person in set 2, but they're not, because the whole point of this is it's bespoke to that class every day. So whether you're in set 1 or set 6, you should only really be getting 2 or 3 right on that first day, because if it's planned carefully enough, the whole point of it is that the teacher's working out where the gaps are, and then over the course of the week, really carefully tailoring those questions to fill the gaps. And by the end of it, making sure that that skill is secure. So I think, yeah, it's important that they experience that failure, and that it's in a low stakes way, because then they build up the confidence. They also become resilient and know that how the process works. And it takes a long time for the students to get into that. But actually, I think because they've been rolled out in some of our schools for a really long time now, they know the expectations of that, and they know they can ask for help, and they know that teacher's going to scan the room and know which one or two they need to model on the Monday, so that on the Tuesday, those two, everybody's going to definitely get at least those two right on the Tuesday, because the teachers address the issue that they've, identified on the Monday. So it's a long process.
Yep.
But hopefully it means that over a course of a week, there's that mixture of success and failure, but also knowing how to move forward on the areas that they've failed, if you like.
How was that in remote teaching? Did it work okay? Did any schools try and implement it during remote teaching?
I mean, Kendall and Andy will be able to talk from their experiences more, because they were actually delivering those live lessons. But I think what I found from speaking to the HODs over the course of the period of absence of schools closed, they kept them in because that was what students knew. And if they changed that, then we were saying that our expectations were changing because they were at home. And actually that's what they expect when they walk into a room in any of our schools. That's what they expect to see. And as soon as we took that away, we were already changing our expectations, which everybody worked really hard to make sure that students were expecting the same high quality lesson that they would have got if they were all in a classroom. But I don't know if Kendall or Andy want to sort of elaborate a bit more on that.
Oh, we gave exactly the same lesson when they're at home and when they're in the classroom. We set it out the same way. We tried to structure the lessons in the same way. Obviously, we brought in different resources and different ways of assessing the students, but we tried to structure it in the same way. So we did start off with the same sort of starter grid. So we're teaching these students what the difference was. Getting 4 questions wrong at the beginning of the week isn't failure. Yes, you've got it wrong. So what? When I was a child, I put my hand on a radiator and I burnt my hand. I learned from it. That's what you do in life. That's where, honestly, it took me about 10 goes, but I did learn. No, but that's what you do in life. You learn. And these kids have got to realize that failure isn't getting something wrong. Failure is not improving or not learning from what the mistakes you make.
That's a very nice point.
Yes,
that's a very nice point.
Do that, it's awesome.
It is. Alex, do you wanna chip in?
Yeah, and we do something very similar, to be fair. But I was thinking about making things like the misconceptions and errors to be much more culturally acceptable within the classroom. So something that we've introduced during this year would be when we go back and we do things like marking and feedback, that we specifically make students have to articulate what it is that they got wrong, and they're writing that out, so that they've got to acknowledge where their mistake was, so that they can then move forward and actually correct that. And we're looking to actually introduce within our reward system for next year, so that one of the rewards that they would get each lesson would be if you can articulate where it is you've made a mistake and how it is that you've gone on and kind of address that and learn from that. So they're learning to be great learners.
If there's any resources, some of the stuff that you guys have put in place sound absolutely awesome. I'm sure the people who are listening to this would be happy to just have a look at those ideas. So if you're willing to share anything that we can put on our website, we'd be happy to host that one for you. So just kind of coming back to a couple of points I mentioned, online learning. So I'm going to throw this open to Andrew, because I know he's very keen to talk about this. We March last year, everything switched off. All the kids were at home. Key worker children were in school. I'm going to say schools never closed. We were always in there with the key worker children. That's something that irritated a lot of teachers. And we were suddenly faced with this situation of effectively, right, how do we make this work? How do we get the kids to get the most out of this? How do we keep an eye on the kids from a child protection point of view? What did we do that worked well? What have we maintained, and are we in any danger of falling back into old ways of our routine of things, when actually there's some really important lessons that we should actually be taking forwards for the future? Andrew?
Yeah, it's a big thing. We learned so much during lockdown. Everybody learned so much during lockdown. We learned there are more resources out there that really, if you use them properly, they help you in educating the students. We learned how resilient those kids can be online and how they can actually access things that before you never really gave them credit for. So we learned to credit kids. And the problem is we all come back into school, students come back in school, we start falling into our old habits. And One of the things that I'm fighting like mad to do is making sure my teachers are incorporating what they've learned from lockdown into the new habits. You know, if they can get the Chromebooks and have them in the lesson more often than they used to, then utilizing them, using the platforms, because there are so many platforms out there, whether it be Dr. Frost, whether it be a Haggerty, whether it be a Spark, there's so many platforms out there that are excellent, and utilizing those platforms and learning to use them in their everyday education. So we learn to teach in a different way. And I feel the different way we learn to teach, we should be carrying a lot of the things forward. Is there anything specific you'd say that was better that you want to take forward? You know, if you could focus on something for people at home? I found that I'm a big believer. I would love to have a Chromebook for every student in the school, but it's not going to happen for a number of years. Yeah. But I found that utilizing the resources, the Haggerty Maths, and letting them do the assessments in the classroom was a big thing, or the Dr. Frost where he has his topic tests, and letting them do that while you at the same time can watch their progress online. And that's a big thing, be able to watch the progress and be able to identify where students are struggling while they're doing it. So that's one of the big things I learned, is to actually use the technology efficiently and use it in my assessment for learning. Is there any technology that people found didn't work? Is there anything that people found, I use this, I tried it, I'm not going to use that one again? Or was it by and large a positive thing?
I was just going to say that one of the things that I think just going back to what Andrew had said there, is one of the things it made me do was really pay attention to what I wanted the students to pay attention to. Yeah. I was quite conscious that a lot of students were working off phones. And so if I was sharing a PowerPoint that had got a lot of noise on it, you know, a lot of stuff going on, actually that became far more irrelevant to them. And actually quite difficult for them to process. So I think because we didn't have that opportunity for the AFL in the same kind of way that we would have done in the classroom, that it made me really focus on exactly what it was that I wanted on my screen had to be really important and not just for the sake of it. And that's been quite good taking that forward. We've tried to kind of keep that going. The other thing I just wanted to add as well was to a couple of the previous comments about the stuff that sort of works in terms of supporting failure and resilience and so on. And it sounds quite a lot similar sort of thing that we're using. We're using the Access Maths, which is just a free website with the starters on it, where the question one is the same question, but with just slightly different numbers every single time. And I know everyone uses it in a different way, but we let the students actually then put fully worked solutions down for one day, and so that then by the end of the week, they should hopefully be being able to do it without, which sounds like it's a very similar idea to your starter grids. The other thing that we did, which has made a big difference to the students taking responsibility for their note taking, rather than just them, you know, me saying, copy down this example for the sake of it, is they now know that they've got open book assessments. So they know that they're obviously, they're not allowed to speak, but they can use anything that they've got written down in their book at all. The other one that I did for year 11 was I said you're allowed a single sheet of A4 paper. You can fill it with as much stuff as you like, but it really makes them think carefully about the notes that they're making and makes their book their personal property that becomes like a working document for them, rather than just something that they have to fill in because they need somewhere to write the answers to some questions.
Do we think, I mean, there are schools around the country that don't let their students take their maths books home. I've seen that in several schools. I wonder if that's had an impact on that, and whether it will change things for the future. For those of you at home, you know, listening into this, if you could just throw into the chat whether your students do take their books home, don't take their books home, whether that's changed the situation. I think one of the key things that came out in the media in relation to online learning was the access to technology, or lack of access to technology, and the variety. You know, several people in one house swamping a broadband. Alex, what was it like from your multi-academy trust point of view?
So because we were using a lot more traffic, actually just using our ordinary sort of laptops in order to be able to deliver, we had times where it was just difficult to actually use our own kind of laptops and so on ourselves, particularly if we were then in school, because in all the schools there were all of those students, all the vulnerable ones that were actually using all of those computers to stream sort of video type things all at the same time, and it really did cause a bit of trouble, and we've had to increase the amount of I don't know what the technical word for it would be. I'm not amazingly IT savvy, but the amount of sort of bandwidth, if you like, that each school needs just to be able to run now, because of all the online stuff. And that's also continued with having to have students go and self-isolate. And we've had to continue to try and do that sort of blended approach to learning, where we've sometimes got students in the school, we've sometimes got students out of school, we've sometimes got a mixture of both, and we're trying to kind of keep all of the students moving forward all at the same time. So it's been quite challenging from that respect. Yeah, I've not been a great fan of a lot of the online stuff. But like was said earlier, we did some student voice on the online stuff and the way that we were doing that. And we found that because in maths, we could still do our lessons in the same way, much as other people have said. And the students really appreciated that familiarity, and the fact that they always were then able to have a live lesson with us rather than being sent off to do other kinds of work. So yeah, it's been very mixed. I particularly liked things like Microsoft Forms. I've enjoyed that. The things I've not enjoyed about that is when you're trying to put the answers in so it will self-mark, and you're trying to come up with every way that they might type that answer in order that it might mark it. And the other problem that I found with that would be being able to give over all your working at the same time. So we would have a lot of instances where students would send a picture of their working so that you could see their working, and then the form would just be kind of their answer sheet, if you like, for the final answer, like an answer line on an exam paper would be. So there's been a real mixture.
Naomi, you were doing work on quizzes on Microsoft Teams and getting their students to hand in work. Is there anything in there that you would continue to take forward into the future, even with them being in the classroom, handing in homework from home?
Yeah, so we don't let them take their books home. So we have started looking at our homework policy. Actually, that's one of the things that we do want to take forward, what we've done, what's worked well in lockdown. And actually, we got really quite in with some year groups, quite competent at using notebook, class notebook, and that's been really, really good. And the year 8s, for some reason, it just happened to be that particular year group really took that on board. So we're looking at whether or not actually that becomes our homework platform, which would be quite interesting, along with forms. But again, I agree with Alex that the problem with forms is that when you're trying to get it to do the self-marking, and you've got to try and come up with every possible variation of an answer, it just becomes a little bit untenable. But I do like the feedback functionality of forms, even if then you have to still mark each question. The fact that you can give that same feedback, you know, that has made things a lot quicker in terms of the marking, things like that as well.
I was interviewing Jamie Frost earlier in the year, and he said, you know, trying to get the equivalence of answers to work in terms of his platform, you know, he's very highly qualified. I think he called it an NP hard problem, which made no sense to me. But he said actually programming it to take that into account was one of the hardest things that he had to try and program. Just in terms of any other platforms, Kendall, what platform were you using for students to hand in work remotely, and will you continue to get them to hand in work using those kind of platforms?
Well, as part of the United Learning Trust, we actually use Hegarty and Sparks for our homework. So it's one of those things where we've naturally just done it while they were at school, and they naturally kept doing it while they were at home, and they've brought it back to the classroom. So we're continuing to use Hegarty and Sparks for most of our homework. But one thing that I did, one online platform I really did enjoy using was diagnostic questions. Really great.
Is it Craig Barton's platform?
Yeah, there's some really good stuff on there. And actually because this year we can't circulate classrooms, we've implemented mini whiteboards into all of our classrooms this year. And it's been phenomenal to just get diagnostic questions on the board, get the whiteboards out, A, B, C, or D, and it just gives you such a picture of what's going on in the room when you can't circulate. So that is one platform that we continue to bring into the classroom after lockdown.
Fantastic. It sounds like there's just been some, the changes we've made in the past 12 months were more significant than the changes we've made in the past 10 years in teaching. When I started teaching 15 years ago, we started off using overhead projectors, and thankfully they went fairly quickly. So Just to move
sorry,
on.
I was just going to add in on that point, if you don't mind. So definitely
You're not going back to overhead projectors, are you, Dan?
No, I'm not.
You're
actually.
not bringing them in.
I'll move on from OHPs, but just about something that we've built in that period of lockdown that will now live beyond that. And we've got now a whole Pupil website where we have, at the moment, it's year 7 to 10 is fully resourced, so students can go in and access a video lesson with one of the advisors' voiceover. And our teachers have access to the same resource without the recording that they can amend to deliver in their classrooms, but there's always this one version that lives on a Pupil website, so that when students miss a lesson for an orthodontist appointment, or because issues unrelated to COVID, they can now access that at a drop of a hat. And I think although teachers will still have their own bespoke version and ways that they deliver that same lesson to that student via Teams or whatever it is that they've set up now, there'll always be one place where they can always go to. If another login doesn't work, there's one place now that every student in our trust can access, and it's sequenced in exactly the same way that our schemes of work are that are used in schools. And that's something now that will live on, and we'll just continue to improve. And we're linking Hegarty and Sparks, which are platforms that, as Kendall said, we use, to those, so they can watch our lesson, then they know what tasks to go and do after that to consolidate it. And that project has been huge, and probably before a pandemic we could never imagine getting to that level because of the work that we used to do. And our roles have changed slightly over this period of time, but actually it's been a really nice time to pause, get that work done, and hopefully something that lives on for years to come.
I think you mentioned there a student being off for non-COVID reasons, and I think in the second half of the autumn term I had 2 lessons where the entirety of my year 11s were all in the classroom at once, with a variety of me and them out, some in, some out, me at home, some in, some out, and everyone dialing in. Is that something that's going to continue? We're moving into the autumn term. Students will hopefully no longer have to isolate in large groups, but we will inevitably have students missing for various health reasons, and for 2 weeks out if they're suffering from COVID. What are kind of the expectations that are going to be placed upon students? Do we need to be educating them? Alex, do you mind? Do you know what your academy is planning? Is it going to be those students dialing in again to view the lessons from home?
Yeah, we've carried on that approach. We've got bubbles closed again as we speak, and we'll just carry that on into the future. So I agree, we've got much better at giving work to students that aren't in school for whatever reason now, and being able to try and keep them up with the rest of their peers in a way that we never would have done before. We would have had them come back, and if they were a really diligent student, they might have copied up the class notes from a friend, but we didn't used to go ahead and just set online work for them or dial them in, and we'll just carry on doing that as long as they're well enough to attend. And they're on well with COVID, then absolutely we'll be expecting them to come and to log in remotely.
When we've got students that have broken the leg and actually can't make it into school for a couple of weeks, we need to be making provision for that. Is that actually putting a greater burden on teachers to actually to now set that work? Even if pupils missing for a day, are there any expectations to do that? Is that changing the nature of the workload of teachers? Dana, do you mind if I ask you for a comment on that one from a multi-academy trust?
I think actually it's, in a way, we hold teachers to account for the grades of the students in their class at the end of year 11. So actually, if we can support teachers now in year 7, 8, 9 and 10, addressing students who are absent, for short periods of time, longer periods of time, students that are, regularly absent for various reasons. Actually, if we're giving them a tool now to support those students, that should work in their favour, rather than saying, at the end of year 11, people have difficult conversations with their line managers and say, well, these kids didn't get this grade because they missed this many lessons. Actually, I think now we're in a better position to say, yes, they did miss this many lessons. They did miss this many lessons. However, it's now, parents know that this is available to students. Maybe it will, the conversations that teachers and parents have together will make more of a difference, because, we can't have parents saying, well, they weren't in the lesson, they missed it, they didn't know how. now actually it's putting a little bit more responsibility on the student because they have access to this. It's putting a little bit more responsibility on the parent who is allowing the student to be off perhaps for longer than they need to be or more regularly than they need to be. And actually, hopefully, with all of those people sort of being held to account in a slightly different way to the way they have before, it might work in everybody's favour at the end.
Yep. Alex, you got something you wanted to throw in on that one?
Yeah, it's just a really small thing, but I certainly had, because we were delivering via Teams, obviously over the course of the last year at various points, and because we record all of those lessons, and I've had lots of students that even that have been in the lesson, if they didn't feel that they fully understood a part of it, they would be asking, will the recording be there? Because I want to go back and I want to have another look at it. So actually, in that respect, it's actually been really positive for them.
Is that something we should continue to do? You know, should we be recording our lessons for students to catch up? Are there any negatives on that one?
I think we need to be careful going down that route long term. Personally, I think, you know, when, not that you've got anything to hide in the classroom, but I think it does throw up some other issues that it's not just as simple as press record and then upload it. You know, that recording then exists forever, and you know, you're then talking about having to edit out things if someone steps in the room and talks through all those sorts of things. And I think we just need to be mindful as well about workload. That obviously, you know, Dana, you're saying that in your trust that you've created all of these recorded videos and things, which is an amazing resource for your schools to have. But we had half of year 10 isolating a couple of weeks ago when we were uploading our lessons, realised that actually when we were trying to get ahead and we were saying, well, here's our PowerPoint that we're going to use in the classroom, actually that created an awful lot of work, because a lot of the time you've got examples that you put on your PowerPoint that you then are going to demonstrate the work solution for. So we had to then make sure those work solutions existed on the PowerPoint when we wouldn't normally have needed them to, because we would have just done that. And that's where Class Notebook has been quite useful, I think, because we could kind of record it on there. But I think it's not just as simple as saying, well, we could now have this bank of resources that we can make available to students who are absent. While I think, yes, we do need to make sure we have that, it is actually quite a workload heavy if those things don't already exist, or if you're using, like I use Matt Woodfine's whiteboard website all the time. It's amazing for in the classroom, quick examples on the board that I can then model the solutions. Well, if I've got students at home, we're not dialing in and we don't record lessons, I have to then screenshot the examples that I've used. So I just think, you know, if you're recording, then great, and if you've got that already there, that's great. But if you haven't, I think we just need to be careful what we're asking staff to do.
Certainly, I think, you know, we're going to be mindful of the workload we put on teachers. I think we're in a much better place for now to support students who are off long-term sick and undergoing hospital treatment, whereas before they would be supported via a hospital with all the disjointedness that can sometimes bring. But now we're in a much better place to support our students that are off ill. I did have a parent sending me an email when I was doing an online lesson last year, that she was in the background. My lesson was on, her daughter was watching it, and she was the parent was laughing her head off at my poor maths jokes involving music that went completely over head of a student. But I did get a lovely email from her. So just to kind of move on really a little bit. So looking at the future on that, and I might throw this onto Andrew really, are there any curriculum changes that we're actually planning, or, you know, has it brought about those discussions of how we're going to order our curriculum, the order we teach things in, the content, the depth? Has it influenced what we do there, Andrew? I'm not sure Andrew can hear me at the moment.
Sorry, you know a lot of that. You know my feelings on this.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I think the curriculum is well behind the curve anyway, because I think with kids having access to the technology they have, a lot of what we teach them is what the technology can do for them. And we should be looking more into the problem solving side of it. We should be looking at more in-depth learning for them. You know, some of the things we rely on teaching the students, for the rest of their life, they're just going to be pressing a button on their phone and the answer will be there and everything will be there for them. So I consider there are massive amount of curriculum changes that are needed. I do not think they will happen. Whoop, and now I can't hear you. There we go.
Sorry, I just put myself on mute for a second. Within the current constraints of the curriculum that they're working with, have you decided to change things in light of what you've been through over the past 15 months?
Ourselves, no, we haven't. With the United Learning Trust, we have a set curriculum that we stick to. Being who we are, we have a sixth form and we very concentrate on our sixth form. So we think it's majorly important that all our students get the opportunity to learn everything they will need to move on to the A-level mathematics. So have we made changes now? No, we haven't made major changes now. We've taken everything into consideration. We haven't made major changes. Do I think we should? Yes, I do. But that'll just make me unpopular with Dana.
That isn't always that's not the case, just to clarify.
Is there anyone else who's planning to rearrange what they've done in maybe Key Stage 3 to help things in the future at all? Kendall, have you got anything that you want to throw in there?
There is, so we are a United Learning School as well, obviously, so we follow the United Learning scheme of work, but there is one thing
Don't make yourself unpopular with Dana as well.
There's one thing that we're trialing next year with the support of United Learning, actually. So we find that, so at Shoreham, we split it into 6 sets. So we have sets 1 through 3, year 11, would be our higher tier of entry. And then our sets 4, 5, and 6 classes would be foundation tier of entry. And we find that it's horrible, but we found that these set 6s end up being SEN heavy, PP heavy, 40% attendance, 30% attendance, almost like this unteachable group that it's a struggle to get them to that grade 4, grade 5 foundation content type mastery. So we're trialing next year is we're calling it a Foundation Plus program, where we're taking the United Learning scheme of work, but we're actually adapting it a little bit, where we're going to try and make it, we talked about those quick wins, those quick successes, to try and get these kids. The goal is to get them up to like a grade 3 by the time they're done in year 11. So we're almost making their journey a little bit longer, where we're going to talk about, okay, the goal is for us to get to, these kids are ungraded at the moment, a lot of them, some grade 1s possibly, but we're trying to get them up to a grade 3, where we've actually taken a couple of the content out, and we're actually putting a lot more of the Key Stage 3 content in, and we're putting a lot of the Key Stage 4 content, but at a smaller scale in, so that way we build up success. I mean, these are the kids who just took our end of year assessments and got maybe 5%, 10. And most of it came from not because they couldn't do it, but because they saw that and went, nope, not doing it, because they just see failure after failure after failure when they take KPI tests and end of year tests. So we're trying to build up that little success where we're going to give them snippets of things throughout the year. And we're calling it our Foundation Plus program. So we're going to see if it has any impact. If we can show them that they are successful at math and that they can be good at math, can we maybe get them a grade 3 and then look to getting them a grade 4 in year 12? That's the goal. Yep.
Alex, have you got anything you want to throw in on that one? Are you planning to make any changes to the curriculums over at GAT?
We've just redone the curriculum again, so we're currently going through that process. We have twice though this year resequenced. Each time, obviously, when we've had lockdowns, we've resequenced what we've done in order to try and get everybody back into the same place, because obviously every time we lock down, we go, right, we're not going to teach them graphs now and all of those things that you usually need other resources for. We're certainly not going to try constructions,
transformations,
which is one of
central rotation.
Come up. Yeah, exactly. So we've already resequenced it, and then we've resequenced to have those things come back in. So I feel as though actually, although we've resequenced it during this year, I don't feel that we're actually behind as such. Some students might have missed more bits than others. There's going to be some students that have been more engaged than others. But on the whole, I feel that we've managed to, because we resequenced at those points and resequenced then for coming back into school, we've covered everything that we're meant to have covered again, and got ourselves back on track to be able to all come back together in September to start our curriculum again, all in the same place, so that we can share our assessment points and all of that kind of thing.
Thank you. So just looking a bit further forward to the future, thinking about, aside from the teacher assessed grades process and assessments, is there anything we would like to see change? We've gone from a modular system to a terminal system. Is there anything that we'd want to see come back, or are we happy with the situation? Naomi, is there anything that you'd want to see change, or are you?
You're going to put me on the spot there with this one, thanks. There's so many different variations and there's so many different considerations, and what works in one place is not going to work somewhere else. And I think what's going to work for one group of students is not going to work for another. And we saw a real marked difference in the trajectory that our higher tier students took when we started talking about tags and narrowing down the assessments to sort of shorter assessments. They really took that on board, and their grades actually started to fly. But equally, I remember the days of coursework, and I remember sitting there for hours trying to annotate on the side of coursework, and I don't want to go back to that either. So I don't know that, but I'm with Andrew. There does need to be a change, and there does need to be a change of how the curriculum is delivered and how the curriculum is modelled to make it fit for purpose, really, for the 21st century, because I don't think at the moment it necessarily is, but I don't know what that looks like. So that's not my help, I'm afraid.
Is there anyone who'd like to see AS levels recoupled to A levels? So Alex, you've got your hand up.
I'm just slightly terrified of going anywhere back near kind of modular sort of system of maths where we're sort of assessing people. I like the idea that we assess people as they go along, but my experience of modular maths was that it turned into a learn this bit and then try and dump it.
Yep.
And I think that's horrendous, because I feel like it's losing the beauty of all the connections that we've got within maths. It fills me with absolute terror that we might at any point go back to that.
We've spent so long as well, haven't we, looking at curriculum models, and you described it, Alex, earlier as like a spiral, and I love that idea of the interleaving, that we're now stopping teaching things in silos. We're trying to move away from this idea that we're doing shape for this term, we're doing number for this. It's all taught interleaved and it's all connected. And as soon as we go back to a modular system, we lose that connection, we lose that ability for students to be able to see how those things are all interleaved and all interconnected. And that then we very much are, like you say, just testing and dumping, and that just doesn't seem right either.
Kendall, have you got anything you want to throw in up from your experiences teaching in the United States on that one?
Yeah, so I've seen both sides, to be fair. So in the US, it's scary, but we call it freshman year. So they come in freshman year, they just learn algebra. And then sophomore year, they just learn geometry. And so you get this issue where they get all the way up to calculus as the goal. Everyone's supposed to be calculus ready in the US, which is, again, a whole other ballgame. But they get to calculus, and then they can't make that connection between geometry, index laws, and all this. It's just really, really frightening. So I'm very much like the system here, where we incorporate all those topics within one. There's one question on the GCSE where you need to know number, you need to know geometry, you need to know all of that in one question. And that, for me, is maths, because maths is so intertwined. So to go back to a module system would be horrifying.
Yep.
Yeah. In life, we have all these problems, and we have to solve the problems. And solve the problems, we've got to incorporate and use lots of skills. And mathematics is that. Mathematics is learning a load of skills to solve problems, and it mimics life. If you went back to a modular system, you're taking away students' ability to cope with the real world. And I think that's the main thing about it. It's when we went to A levels and we went linear at A levels, that was fantastic, because they had to remember everything and build it through. And it wasn't just a case of, I'll teach you this topic, then I can forget that and move on to something else. So
I think there's a disconnect with when they go to universities, and it kind of goes back to exams every year that count towards their final grades.
They have to have the skill sets, and we're teaching the tools to actually enable them to access those topics at universities. And we're teaching them all the tools to access those topics. Now, they might not use them, and I understand that. But then again, a carpenter might not use some of the tools he's put in his toolkit. He might just have his few favorite ones. That's fantastic, but I'm not going to take away the ones he doesn't use. Absolutely.
So just in the last 5 minutes, there's a couple of kind of probably key points for people as we're coming up to the autumn term. And it's one of them is something Andrew mentioned to me before the session, that I think it was you, Andrew, if my memory serves, that our year 13s next year, they won't have sat any external exams. They didn't do their GCSEs. What are we planning with that one to just make sure that it's not that terminal pressure that they've just not experienced? Dana, would you mind throwing in a comment on that one? I'm sorry to pick on you. Is that
No,
quite
not
a
at all.
weighty
It's
issue?
fine. Yeah, I think, you know, it's really important that we have in our schools a really rigorous process to give the students the public exam experience that they've missed out on without overburdening the students of thinking, I've got, you know, this mock is make or break, but actually they lost that opportunity of, and it's good sometimes to build up a little bit of anxiety of walking into an exam hall and it actually really mattering on that day and having that opportunity to show off what the students know. And I think there's always a danger of us, you know, students saying, you know, if you can't do it on the day, then, you know, your life is over. But actually, it's really important that these students take this as an opportunity to show off what they can do and sort of have those conversations with students about that opportunity to show us what you can do. And, you know, it isn't going to be make or break if it's the mock, because we can use that to identify gaps and then later on fill them. But I think we do owe students as much as possible to facilitate an experience as close as possible to what a GCSE exam would feel like. An exam timetable, you know, if you would typically run a revision session before a public exam, are you going to do the same for your mocks? When are you going to start having conversations with students about how they performed? Are you going to just say, oh, I've marked paper last night and you did really well on this section? Or are we going to actually make them wait and make them sort of preempt what that feeling is going to be like for them in the summer when they get round to it? So yeah, I think you know, we need to strike a balance between not overburdening them with stress and anxiety about the build-up of an exam, but putting them in that zone so that they do feel a little bit of pressure, because they will on the day.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that came out from the teacher assessed grades is there were some schools that were putting students through exam series after exam series after exam series. Alex, are you planning to put in any more exam series for your students to give them a more experience than you would in other years?
No, we've still got the same kind of assessment calendar as we'd have any other year. Or actually get to a point where they take an exam and they've got no time to fill any of those gaps that are missing before they're about to take another exam. So no, we're not adding any extra in, because they need to have the time to do the teaching as well.
It's that balance of the pressures.
Yeah,
and just kind of on one final point here, that, you know, we've got a couple of minutes left. That, you know, we've got students going from year 11 into year 12, and I'm sure you all experienced from last year, students coming to you into your sixth forms where the grades that they had at GCSE bore no relation to what you were seeing as the skills. Naomi, have you got any comments on that one in terms of that year 11 to year 12 transition? You know, we've been through it one year. Are we managing it differently this year?
I think just a very clear transition programme, a very clear fundamental knowledge that is required to access year 12, the year 12 work, and that's what you start with at the start, and that then those key skills from higher GCSE are constantly revisited throughout certainly that first term, and using those 1 mark questions and all resources that are available. But that it's not just an ad hoc kind of, if we come across something, we'll try and fill it out. No, actually, this is the clear programme of transition that we've got, because we know that algebra is absolutely fundamental to being able to access it. Or, you know, whatever it is you decide, is the clear process.
Yep. Andrew, you've got a comment you want to throw in on that one?
Well, when you're looking going into year 12, yeah, we really experienced this year a few students who just shouldn't have been there. And unfortunately, the schools that graded them incorrectly wasted a year of their life, which was a real shame for those students. I mean, they're nice kids, but they just don't have the ability, and the school had given them a grade they never deserved. And it does worry me this year, very much so, that we're going to have the same thing happen next year. Students are going to turn up for A-level. They're not going to have the skills required to do it. Even if they've got a grade 7, they're still not going to have the skills required to do it. Schools are giving grade 7s after having stopped teaching before they finish the course. So one of my big concerns, and one thing I'm going to have to cope with next year, I don't know how I'm going to cope with it. I'm just going to have to cope with it.
Yep. I've just seen a comment in the chat that they had that for students who arrived into college who clearly did not have the skills to do their level 3 course. And I think there's going to be a lot of schools out there putting in place, looking at their students a lot more carefully when they come in the autumn term.
One thing we did do, we put in with core maths. If a student was doing particularly badly on mathematics A level and they come in supposedly on a 7 and they weren't making it, I made them take core maths.
Yeah.
So they had to do a second qualification. If they could prove to me by the April that they'd improved in their single maths, then I let them drop the core maths. But if not, they had to continue with it.
Anyone else got any final comments to throw in on that one before we finish the session? Donna?
Yeah, and Andy and Kendall will know I am really passionate about this, but I think it's really important that we take some responsibility as a teacher and as a leader to have some difficult conversations with students, because students work really hard and they're really nice. It doesn't necessarily mean that your course is the right course for them. And actually, we owe it to the students to have difficult conversations with the students and the parents from the beginning, because there's nothing more disheartening than getting to an end of year 12 with a student and then saying, I told you so, or not saying that, but wanting to say that.
Yeah.
So we have a responsibility from, it now in schools, if we still have concerns about students that are potentially going to be accessing our A-level course. And because they've completed the transition program doesn't automatically mean that, they haven't had their results processed. Students may have completed the transition program that you've set, but it doesn't automatically give them a pass to the course. And even after results day, we have to have those conversations. And if we think that it's right, and then within a few weeks, it hasn't worked out, it's not too late at that point to have the conversations, but we need to preempt students doing a course for a whole year that they can't be successful on. And this takes us right back to where we started today about motivating students. And if they are sitting in our classrooms every day, not feeling success regularly enough, then it's a disservice to those students. And that's something I feel really, really passionate about. So more than ever, I think we need to have those tough conversations.
Yeah, and my advice for people listening, classroom teachers listening into this is, make sure that you have these conversations with your head of department and get their support in having these difficult conversations with parents. Because as an ex-head of department, they are difficult, they are tough. And one final point on this one, we've come so far in the past 15 months, especially in terms of students zooming into classrooms, dialing in on Teams. It unfortunately does mean the end of snow days. Thank you, everybody. Just a final point for us. Thank you for joining us for this session with maths leaders as part of the Pearson Maths Festival. We do hope you found it interesting and helpful and a starting point for further discussion. We look forward to seeing you at other sessions over the course of the festival, and you will see a feedback survey open in your browser when we end the webinar. And if you could just take a couple of minutes to complete that, it would be most appreciated. And finally, we just wanted to remind you again that you can join the conversation on social media and beyond using the hashtag hashtag Pearson Maths Festival 21, and by entering our mini competitions, nominating your colleagues as maths champions, and by answering our polls that you'll see on at Pearson Schools. Please do get involved. There's further information on the website, so please have a look. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I've enjoyed myself. I hope you did too, and I hope everyone at home did as well.